Hi, and welcome to this free webinar on building a case for a legacy giving program. I hope you're as excited as I am. As you can probably imagine, I absolutely love legacy fundraising, and I hope for all organizations to establish their own legacy program. In this webinar, over the next hour, we'll be covering several topics. So the main topic is obviously how to build your case for a legacy program. So we're going to talk a little bit first about the state of legacy giving. Then we're going to talk about how to build a case for launching a legacy program, and then how to create the right culture for legacy success. But first, a little bit about me. My name is Ligia Pena. I'm a legacy and fundraising coach at LFP Solutions, my company, that's me. I have been working in the nonprofit sector for nearly 20 years, actually 19 and a half years now and counting. I've trained, I'm a coach, so I've trained thousands of fundraisers through different webinars. I've presented at conferences around the world. I've done one-on-one coaching, and I've also taught in two universities, one in Montreal and one in Toronto. I'm also a strategist. I build legacy programs from scratch. I've done that in dozens of organizations, both small, medium, and large international organizations. I have been a fundraising director, so I've done fundraising across all channels. And my superpower is really building infrastructure. So building a robust fundraising infrastructure so that you can be successful. In my 20 years career, I've touched on pretty much almost every type of organizations, youth, environmental, international development, mental health, everything. I'm also the author of Small Shop Fundraising in Excellence in Fundraising in Canada, the second edition. And more recently, I am a PhD candidate at the University of Kent in Canterbury, UK, where I'm currently doing research on charities' behavior towards national legacy umbrella campaigns as a tool to change society's behavior towards donations and wills. So in a nutshell, that's me. But more importantly, what you will get is here some concrete, tangible tools and insights on how to get your board and your senior management to agree to start a legacy program in your organization. So what are some of the common myths about legacy fundraising? Because there's a lot of myths out there that we need to debunk a little bit. So the first one is that legacy fundraising is difficult, and it is completely untrue, because legacy fundraising is about inspiring your current, actual, older donors to realize their philanthropic dreams through a gift and a will. And so basically this is all done through marketing, and we all do marketing in our organizations. It's just that it's slightly different. The second myth, which is related to the first one, is that one needs to be an expert, such as a lawyer or an accountant or a financial planner. And here's the thing, it's not true. You don't need to be an expert on financial vehicles to leave a legacy gift, because when we talk about legacy gift, specifically here, is about a donation in a will. And so what you do need to know is how to market properly, and you need to understand how donor behavior affects the way you're going to market. But you don't need to be a lawyer per se. However, having said that, it is good to have in your arsenal of allied professionals someone who's a lawyer who can provide you with advice when needed, but you don't need to have that expertise. The next thing is that another myth is that legacies are realized decades later. And while part of that is kind of true, my contention is that when you do an analysis of your database, it is quite possible that you have donors in your database right now who are at that age where they're towards the end of, they're much older, and therefore the gift could be realized much sooner. So we know that typically we say when you start a legacy program, you can start getting results within 10 years or so. And that's true. However, now with the wealth transfer happening right now, if you have donors that are over the age of 70 and 75, the reality is that those gifts might be realized sooner than you think. Let me give you an example. I recently had to start a legacy program in an office that is located in Japan. This was in 2016, and we started a reactive program. They didn't have much money, so we did something. We just reutilized a lot of the communications and marketing tools they were using. And within 2 years, they already had they already had 100 people in their pipeline, and they all had already received 2 bequests. So this goes to show that it doesn't necessarily mean that you will only get gifts in a long time, in a decade later. The fourth myth is that good marketing focuses on organizational needs. And it's crazy that we still have to continue saying this over and over again, but successful fundraising marketing, and especially when it comes to legacies, is all about the donor. What works with donors is putting the donor at the center of everything, of all the success that the organization has. Actually, the donor is the true hero here. It's not the organization. And so by putting the donor directly in it, in the success of the organization, that is what will result in legacy success. The next thing, the fifth myth, is that legacy marketing should be passive. Now, I just mentioned before that in Japan, we had started a passive program, but the marketing was not passive. What I mean by that is you need to be proactive in communicating how the donor can be part of the future of the organization, even beyond their time on this earth, to succeed and to help the organization realize its mission. So that is not passive marketing. This is very much proactive. And so this is incredibly important when you design your marketing materials and when you start inserting legacy messaging, to be very, very proactive and really inspire donors in a very proactive way to consider leaving a gift in their will to your organization after they have taken care of their loved ones. And the last myth is that legacies are only for the wealthy. And this is the part that makes my head explode. I've often heard from senior management, from board members, and even from legacies fundraisers that they would want to know who their major donors are so they can speak to them about legacies. Well, in my experience and in a lot of my colleagues' experience, the majority of legacy gifts come from regular people, middle-class individuals who perhaps in their lifetime did not make very, very big, significant gifts, but who in their lifetime has accumulated a lot of assets. And that's the thing. It's not about being cash rich, it's about being asset rich. And so oftentimes these individuals are people who are more frugal or more careful with their cash allowance to live on, but that have accumulated a lot of assets. And that's what you should be looking for. So what's more important in here when you're trying to determine who are your prospective donors, it's that donor who has been given small amounts but consistently over a long period of time, rather than the person that comes in, drops $50,000 once and is not heard of for another 2 or 3 years. Because what you want is that donor that is so passionate about the organization that they will stay with you for a long, long time. So those are some of the 6 common myths that you need to wrap your head around, but also communicate with your organization. So why should we care? Why should you care about legacy fundraising? Well, right now we are in the midst of the largest wealth transfer in the world. This is the first time that there's such a transfer of wealth from one generation to the next, and it is valued at approximately $16 trillion US. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money right now that is being left to family members, to organizations, to causes that are dear to very important people. So imagine if your organization was to get even just a small fraction of that piece of the pie. That would make a huge difference in the nonprofit sector, don't you think? So now, what does it take? What do we need to do in order to tap into all this? Well, first and foremost, we need to stop spinning our wheels. We have to have a long-term vision and support continuous training and support. We can no longer just develop plans, fundraising plans that meets the immediate needs of the organization. Therefore, just like meets the financial needs of the year in order to survive. Yes, you need to keep the lights on today and in the next year, but you're always spinning your wheels. But if you start having a more longer term vision, and while at the same time, meeting your current needs, then you will have a very robust, diverse fundraising program that will help you take care of everything. Next, we need to properly invest our resources. I don't know about you, but every single organization that I've ever worked at always had limited resources. I've never once worked at an organization where money wasn't an issue. So we need to be very strategic in the way we develop and implement our strategies. And legacies have the lowest cost per dollar raised, which means we have the highest rate of ROI, return on investment. And so when you see this compared to other fundraising tactics, it makes total sense to invest in that and be very, very strategic in the way it's done. Next, what we need to do is be creative and innovative. We have to stop doing legacy fundraising the way it was being done decades ago. We need to have a multi-channel approach to legacy marketing and take risks. Be cheeky, be creative and innovative. There's some great stuff happening around the world that we need to look at and see how we can adapt it in our own markets. We have to be constantly innovating, and there is so much room for improvement when it comes to legacy giving. And lastly, we need to bring value to donors. That's a very important element. We need to create long-term donor journeys so they may realize their philanthropic dreams. And that means looking at every new donor that is acquired and brought into the organization on day one. We need to look at that donor as if they will stay with you forever, and they will have each and every one of them have a potential for a legacy gift. And so we need to relook at the kind of journey we put our donors through with the optic that at one point, years from now, down the line, they will leave a gift in their will. So everything we do from day one until that moment comes is with legacy giving as the underlying element that we need to keep in mind. So then, now we understand this, we need to communicate this in our organization. Now, how do you build your case? So first and foremost, you want to find your internal allies. So in my experience, every time I have tried to start a new program or create a new initiative, I needed to have allies. And you do too, because we can't do anything without having people who will back up our ideas and support us in the process. And so when it comes to legacy fundraising, the best allies that you could really tap into is first and foremost, and this has been my experience throughout my entire career, is the director of finance. It is such a clear and direct ally that no one else, that's probably one of the best ones. Why? Well, because they are concerned about the financial stability of the organization, and when you let them know about the potential of legacy giving and how it has a very high ROI, it would be surprising if they wouldn't support the idea of building a legacy program. Naturally, I would assume that your fundraising director would be in support of all this. So of course that goes without saying. The next would be a programs director, because they also have a vested interest in making sure that you and your team, the fundraising team, raises enough money to cover the program cost on a yearly basis and in the future. And so they would be a key ally internally. And the next would be someone who has the executive director or the CEO's ear. It could be anybody in the organization, and we're talking internally. So anybody in the organization where the ED, no matter what this person says, the ED will listen, pay attention, and consider their point of view. So it's up to you to build your social capital within the organization and see who is that key person. There's always one in every single organization that will have that kind of clout or credibility with the executive director. Next, after you've built your internal allies, you want to look outside. Who are your external allies? So that could be the board president or the chair of the board, or it could be the vice chair or the vice president of the board. It could be the finance chair, because if you've got the director of finance, most likely the finance chair will also be on board with that. And this is where you can utilize the director of finance to help you get that buy-in from the finance chair on the board. It could also be a major donor or a contact at a foundation that your organization has a very close relationship with. I wouldn't say just about anybody, but someone that's key, either a foundation or major donor who has been with your organization for a long time, who is sophisticated enough in terms of their knowledge about fundraising that they would be in support of the idea. And then next is someone who has clout. It could be someone in the community. It could be someone in the vicinity of the organization that has clout with the senior management and the board, that they could also be someone who can support the idea and encourage you and get other people to jump on board with you as you build your case for launching a legacy program in your organization. So next, what happens? You want to start building your actual case, right? You will be expected to put together a plan and a proposal that you will present to your fundraising director, the executive director, and most likely your board. So first and foremost, you want to start macro. And what I mean by that is a broad profile. So you want to create a country or community profile. What's the difference between the two? This is where the type of organization and the scope of your community comes in play. What I mean by that is, if you're a small local organization, you only need to build a profile of the community in which you work in. If you're an organization that services an entire province or a state or an area, you want to build that profile for the scope of the territory in which you work in. If you're a national organization, well, then you'll want to do a country profile. Or if you are an international organization and you're trying to build a profile for different markets, you would build that profile for the different countries in which you want to start your legacy program in. So it really depends on your organization and the community in which you work in, and then you go from there. So what I'm going to share with you is I'm putting the entire package, everything that I believe and that I believe will help you. Then it's up to you to see what is applicable to your specific situation, okay? So don't go thinking, oh my goodness, Lisa told me that I have to do this and I have to find all this information for everything. It might not be applicable to you, so don't lose any sleep over it. Pick and choose the elements that will help you build your case, because only you know, your board, your executive director, your senior management team, you know for sure, you know better than I do what kind of information will be useful for them and will be the elements that will help them make that decision for you. So let's go. So the community profile. So what you want to start with is, first and foremost, the number of the population of people over the age of 55. So let's say, for the sake of simplicity for this webinar, we use a community. So a city, the city that you work in, okay? Let's say your organization is in a certain specific community. You will want to find out how many people live over the age of 55 in that community. Why 55? Well, it gives you an idea of how much potential your organization has to go acquire prospective legacy donors over the age of 55, because you don't want to be looking at people who are younger, because they're not at that stage of starting to think about their legacy and start thinking about writing a will and so on. So we use a cutoff of 55. If that is too complicated for you and you find it easier to go start at 65, that's okay as well. Okay, so don't worry about it. But let's say for this the minimum age would be 55. Okay. Next, what you want to do is of this group of 55-year-olds, you want to have that broken down between male and female. Now, the reason being is when we look at the statistical predispositions of legacy prospects, the majority of legacy donors are female donors. And so having an understanding of how many men and women are in your community will give you an indicator of the potential. Okay. Then you want to look at the average life expectancy. So that's really important, because when you're going to be doing projections of when a gift will be realized, knowing the life expectancy will give you a clear indication of when you can potentially expect a gift to get realized. Okay. And we're going to be, if you join the online legacy coaching program, we'll be going into a lot of details about this, about projecting income and so on. The next thing is the education level. So again, sticking within this group of people, what is the education level of people in your community? More specifically, you want to look at tertiary education level. What I mean by that is the level of the percentage number of people with a university degree, bachelor's, master's, and so on. The reason being is, again, when we look at the statistical predisposition of legacy donors, the majority, the highest number of people who leave a gift in a will are people with university level education. Okay. Is that to say that people without a university degree do not leave a legacy gift? No, of course not. However, statistically, the higher the level of education, the higher propensity to leave a legacy gift is there. Then you want to look at the home ownership rates. And that's incredibly important because, as I said earlier, legacy gifts is based on assets. So the rate of the amount of the gift will be higher when the individual has more assets, right? And a home is an asset. And so if you live in a community where, for instance, the percentage of the population is 80% of a home ownership, then that means that the majority of your legacy pledgers will have a home, and therefore there is higher chances that your average legacy gift will be much higher because of that. Then you want to look at the percentage of adult population with a will. And of course, that makes a lot of difference, because what that means is that people are obviously going to see their advisors, going through the process of thinking about what they want to do with their estate. And it also increases the chance that perhaps the advisors have communicated the possibility of the donor leaving a gift in a will to an organization. And so that will give you a very good indication about the level of sophistication of the people in the community when it comes to gifts and wills. Basically is the normalization of the conversation about a gift and a will. And that leads to the next point, the next element that you need to look at is the percentage of population of people that leave a gift and a will. And so that's where the normalization of gifts and wills comes in very, very handy. And so knowing that if you say, for instance, in your community, 25% of the population leave a gift in their will to a nonprofit, well, you're already far ahead than other communities or other markets. And so that's incredibly important, and that could be something that plays to your advantage. If the rate is very low, for instance, in some markets that is the case, then that means that you need to factor that in your marketing strategy, whereby you will have to start the conversation at a few steps earlier, meaning that you will have to start normalizing the conversation about gifts and wills in general, in order to then introduce the concept of legacies within your organization. So these are like key indicators that helps you better fine-tune your eventual strategy for your legacy program. Then you also want to look at the percentage of people who have donated in the last 12 years. So in general, you want to look at that number. And why 12 years? It could be 10. Whatever information you can find is fine. And the reason being is that if you can find it out, then it tells you if people have a tendency to donate over a long period of time as opposed to just jumping from one organization to the next. And so that means that there's a high level of commitment towards the causes that is dear to the donors, and commitment is a key indicator to legacy success. And the last two things you want to include in your external review is the charitable donations as percentage of gross domestic product. And so that gives you a little bit of the purchasing power, for lack of a better term, when it comes to to giving in your community. And the last indicator is the number of registered charities, especially major competitors in your market. So knowing how many registered charities are in your community gives you an idea of how big the pool of the competition is in your market, but it also gives you an indicator. You also have to look at who are your major competitors. Let's say you've got 3 universities and 4 hospitals, and they're the ones that are getting the bulk of legacy gifts. You know that your work might be a little bit more difficult, but so then, and so you need to keep that in mind, so that that will impact your strategy. Not only that, is knowing who your major competitors means that you can then go look at what they do, learn from what they do, what are they doing well, what are they not doing well, and how can you use that to your advantage so that you can do better than everybody else and you can be more creative and innovative with your own program. So knowing your competitors is extremely important in the success of your own program. So then what happens next? Now you've got a clear idea of what your external market looks like. So now you want to look at the internal view. So what does it look like within your own organization? So your donor insights will help you determine the potential in your organization within your own database, right? So you want to look at the number of monthly donors. Why is that? Well, all of the work that I've ever done, the research that I've read, and I've mentioned this already previously, your best legacy prospects are people that are donors who have been giving to you for a long time, consistently, even if it's not high amounts. Let me give you, for instance, the biggest legacy gift I ever got was $592,000 in an organization that I worked at many years ago. And it was 100% of the woman's estate. She had left the entire estate to the organization. When I looked at her donation record, she had only made 3 donations of $25 each throughout the lifetime. Now, for all intents and purposes, she wasn't, someone that would have stood out. But because of those 3 small gifts, she clearly had a really good experience. And so she left 100% of her estate to the organization. And so imagine the potential of your monthly donors. They're people that are extremely committed, that continue giving. So those are the people that you really, really want to have as those are your biggest prospects. And those are the people that you want to start with, right, when you start your legacy program. Next is you want to look at years donating. How long have people been giving? So it doesn't necessarily need to be monthly donors. It could be someone that gives once a year. It's their annual gift. They give it to you, but they've been doing it consistently for the last 15 years. Well, that person is obviously very committed to you. And so that's someone that you want to go and prospect. Then you want to look at the age of your most committed donors. So when you look at those donors that have been giving to you for a long time, what age groups do they fall into? Okay. And so then you can start segmenting your lists. And so that will give you an idea of, if you were to start a legacy program tomorrow, for instance, then you would most likely want to start marketing to your older donors who have been supporting you for the longest. Then you want to look at the long-term annual recurring gifts. So as I was saying before, it doesn't necessarily need to be someone who gives on a monthly basis, but someone that gives once a year or twice a year or at special appeals, but has been doing it consistently for many, many years. So that's a clear indication of someone that is very committed to your cause. Then you want to look at the strength of your mid-level giving program. As I mentioned earlier, oftentimes people tend to think, oh, well, let's look at our wealthy donors and see if they'd want to leave a legacy gift. Well, no, because usually it's more of the mid-level, the working class, middle class group of donors that will leave a legacy gift. And so if you have a strong mid-level program, that will be a useful and very powerful pipeline to build your own legacy program. If you don't have a mid-level program, then consider starting one and talk to me. We can see, you and I can talk about how I can help you build your mid-level program as well. And then you want to look at your long-term volunteers. We often tend to forget that volunteers can also leave a gift in their will. They have assets, and maybe they're not donating because, we don't ask volunteers to make a donation, or perhaps they don't have the financial means to make a donation, but they most likely have assets. And so you want to consider approaching them for a legacy gift, because you're not asking them to give you money today. It's for the future, and they're not even going to be around then. So, they're a great prospect. And then finally, other things you want to consider are other donor behaviors, like people who sign petitions. If ever you do petitions or things like that, they might be people who would also be interested, because if they're constantly signing petitions for your organization, they clearly support you in one way. It might not be financial, but they support you in other ways. You could look at people who attend your events regularly, or any other donor behavior that demonstrate that they're really, really committed to your cause. So then what do? You want to put it all together. You have to write your business case. So you want to write out the project vision, the rationale, the key deliverables, with a timeline, the success criteria, how will you measure your success, the scope and the phases of the implementation of your program, and the budget, obviously. You might be able to do it without any new budget, and if that's the case, that's fantastic. I'm one of those people who believes that you don't necessarily need to have a huge budget in order to start a program, but you do sometimes require a bit of things. You might need some customization of your database, or you might need to relook at some of your marketing, etc., your website. So you want to look at that. But here's the thing. If you signed up to the online legacy coaching program that I'm developing, you'll automatically receive the templates for you to build your legacy case for support, and all of the templates that are integrated into this webinar. So then the next thing that will help you make sure that you can get investment for your legacy program is the culture of philanthropy, because we know that fundraising can't succeed without a strong culture of philanthropy. And this is especially true when we talk about legacy fundraising. So here are 3 things you can do to strengthen your culture of philanthropy. And of course, there are many, many things that we could be doing, but these are the 3 that I believe are directly related to legacy fundraising. So first and foremost, share donor stories. So you want to inspire your colleagues by sharing the reasons why your donors have left a gift in their will to your organization, or could potentially leave a gift in their will to the organization. Remember that Japanese organization I mentioned earlier? Well, they were facing the same thing. And I remember when I walked into the office the first time, and I said that I was the legacy person, the global legacy person, people just went, ooh, scary, ooh, you talk about death, And we know that legacy fundraising is not about death. It's actually about life. And so I got the legacy manager to start telling donor stories. And 2 years later, when I went to visit again 2 years later, and I walked in the office, everyone was like, oh, Alicia, yeah, the legacy person, that's so great. We've got a program and everything. And that's because through telling donor stories, the legacy manager in the office basically normalized the concept of legacy giving and debunked a lot of the myths that people had and the awkwardness that people had towards the idea of legacy gifts. Next, debunk the myths. So I just referred to that now. So by taking the focus away from death, from the concept of death, and putting it on the values that are shared with the donors, your colleagues will understand why donors leave a legacy. So it's about the sharing of the values between the donor and the values that the donor lived through their life and the values of the organization. And when it's framed in that way, there's something that happens in people's brains where they go, okay, I get it. I see it now. It's not about talking about death. It's not about the money. It's about the shared values. And so this is the most important thing you can do. And then lastly, you have to make it part of everything. You have to present the long-term vision from the moment you acquire new donors. And remember that it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so it's important to look at every donor from the beginning of the journey, from the moment they join your organization, as someone who has the potential to leave you a brilliant gift in their will. So these are the elements for you to implement to start your legacy program. Now, if you found this interesting, I invite you to join my 6-month online legacy coaching program. And so we can work together in many ways. So this 6-month online program is something that you can do from the comfort of your home, sitting at your desk. And what it is that over every single month, we'll be addressing one key element to get your program off the ground. And by the end of the 6 months, you will have a program that is running. You will have your entire foundation set up, and you will have started doing marketing for your legacy program. So technically, by the end of the 6 months, you should have people in your pipeline already. And so every month there will be a webinar, a group webinar, and I'm limiting the group to small groups because I want it to be very highly personalized so that you feel like you've got my undivided attention. I will limit the groups to no more than 10 or 12 people, and that is it. So that's why it's important to join as soon as possible. So you've got the webinar every month. Then there will be one group coaching program session during every month. And so this is where we would do a Q&A, brainstorm. We could do all kinds of exercise to help you overcome whatever challenges you're having during a month. So it's to support the webinar and the integration of your learnings. And then when you need to, there will be a one-on-one 30-minute coaching session with me that you get to book at your convenience. And of course, there'll be a lot more information. There'll be templates. You will basically have an entire package just for you at every month. So you will get a lot of information. Another way that we can work together is I do fundraising strategy. So whether it's legacy program or general fundraising program or high value fundraising, I can help develop your strategy so that you can be successful. I also do consulting. So whether it's doing a development audit, running a campaign for you, building a program from scratch, reviewing and starting your marketing and donor development program, or developing multi-channel programs. And lastly, I'm also a speaker and trainer. I present at conferences, I do webinars, I do board and staff retreat, and I also do professional coaching and mentorship. So if all you need is just to have some coaching time with me, I can develop a block of coaching hours just for you, so you can have me. You'll have my undivided attention, and we can work together that way. So if you're interested in the online coaching program, here you can, and in this last slide, you can book a free 30-minute call with me where I can go into more details about the program, and then I can let you know if you're in, and then we can take it from there. So if you want to get in touch with me, you can also reach out to me on Twitter, on Instagram. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You have here my email address and my website. And I hope you have found this webinar useful. I hope it helps you build that case so that you can start the legacy program. And more importantly, I really hope we get to work together on the online coaching program. So again, thank you so much. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.